How did Poland go from having literally zero Jewish people to being what I believe almost the second home of Jews? I don't understand how it happened, but today we're going to find out. My name's Rob. Make sure you like and subscribe, and let's do a little bit of learning together.
966. The Eastern European Plain. For 4 years, a merchant and diplomat named Ibrahim ibn Yaqub has traveled all over Europe on behalf of his boss, Cordoban Foreign Minister Hasdai ibn Shaprut. He's met Holy Roman emperors and pagan Vikings, but now he has come to witness the creation of an entirely new country, the Duchy of Poland. Population, 1 million. Jewish population, 0.
So there. So I didn't actually know what duchy was, what duchy meant, but apparently it is the territory of a duke. So Poland was originally just a territory of a duke. I never knew that. That's interesting. But yeah, 966, 0 Jews. A few years later, quite a lot. Let's find out how.
How did a land with no Jews during the Sephardic Golden Age become home to nearly a third of the world's Jews by the 1770s? Well, that took centuries, and we don't have time for it today. But here's how it got started. When Ibrahim ibn Yaqub had come to witness the establishment of Polish statehood, he was far from the first Jew to visit that land. Over the previous couple centuries, the Radanim had been a regular sight on the steppe route between the Frankish realms and China. But it would still be a long time after Ibrahim's visit before any Jews actually settled there. What can I say? Poland was really far away, and since the collapse of the Tang dynasty and the rise of the Rus, Jewish traders had stopped coming that way. By the end of the 11th century, there were known to be Jewish communities in Przemyśl and the capital Gniezno, but we're still talking tiny numbers, probably fewer than 200. It was only after the First Crusade that the Jewish community of Poland grew to take on a more prominent role. Not necessarily bigger, just more prominent.
I want to know why, though. And so when I think of Jewish people, I think of places like Israel, right? I think that's fair to say that, Israel, the main place for Jewish people, or certainly around that area, but that's not that close to Poland, and it's not necessarily, especially even in the 1700s, still not necessarily a practical way round to Poland. And why there? I want to know more about the travel side of things.
During the Rhineland massacres of 1096, a rogue priest named Folkmar led a massacre of the Jews of Prague, compelling many of the survivors to flee to Poland. While Poland's establishment in 966 had been conditioned on the adoption of Roman Catholicism as the official religion, the country remained mostly pagan for a few centuries, and without the deep-seated anti-Semitism imposed by generations of Roman rule and church teaching, Duke Bolesław III allowed Jews to own land and put them to work minting the country's coins. But Poland's rising fortunes also brought many of the old problems from the West. When Duke Bolesław the Chaste invited German settlers to establish their own laws in Polish cities, stripping Jews of their political and property rights was usually the first priority. So in 1264, Duke Bolesław the Pious issued the Statute of Kalisz, so called because by this point most Jews in Poland were living in the town of Kalisz near the border with the Holy Roman Empire. Now, we don't actually have the original 1264 charter, just some later copies, so it isn't certain how much of what we have was in the original version. But basically, the statute ensured that Jews had all the same rights as Gentiles, that Gentiles would get the same punishment for committing crimes against Jews as they would against Christians, and that Jewish courts had full autonomy over both civil and criminal law.
It just makes me laugh. And I know times were different back then, and you can't necessarily judge on today's time, I suppose. But you can certainly look back and think, you can certainly learn, right? But back then, and actually not even that long ago, how different societies have different rights. But we're all people. We're all human beings. I don't understand why certain denominations, I think that's the right word, would have different rights to other people. So, for example, just generally white people or Catholics or Jewish people or black people or women, homosexuals. Like, we're all the same. I just don't understand, because we are all the same. I don't understand the whole thing of having different rights for different people. It's mad to think that, right? Especially now, looking back, it's like, why? Mad.
But while the Statute of Kalisz gets talked up a lot today, it didn't actually accomplish much in the short term. Control of Poland at this time was split between a bunch of rival dukes, of which Bolesław the Pious was just one, and not even the main one. And in that divided state, the Catholic Church was powerful enough that just 2 years later, an ecumenical council in Wrocław was able to declare the statute void and require Jews to wear the yellow cap and red badge.
I think I say Wrocław a little bit better than he does. Yes.
Order them to hand over any of their property outside certain neighborhoods, and prohibit them from holding public office, selling goods to Christians, eating with Christians, being invited into Christian homes, or being seen in public during any Christian holiday.
And bearing in mind, I would just like to say how nonsense this is. Bearing in mind I'm not religious anyway, but there isn't really a lot of difference to what Christians and Jews believe in, right? Other than the fact that Christians believe in Jesus being the life form of God and all that, but they still believe in the same God. That's fair to say, right? They still believe in the same God, just a few different stories different. But how can there be such divide and such animosity almost between these two different religious groups when they basically believe in the same higher power? In my head as an outsider, that's what I'm thinking anyway.
On the grounds that the Jews were supposedly plotting to murder all Christians. Now, for most of Northern Europe, that kind of insanity was already pretty normal, but it really pissed off the Polish dukes. Not only did these restrictions go against the national economic interest, they were just another way that foreign powers were meddling in a weak and divided Poland. Once the country was reunified as a full kingdom in 1320, King Władysław the Short got rid of all the local jurisdictions and established a single national code of law that made Jews equal citizens, removing all of the legal discriminations and even allowing Jews to dress like the nobility, which was unheard of even in Spain. But while Władysław's laws gave the Jews their freedom back, it was his son, Casimir the Great, who took things to the next level.
Casimir the Great, by the sounds of it, was a very good king, leader, person. I don't know enough about him. I want to know more. If anyone's got a really good video about him, this may actually give me lots of good details about him. But obviously we learn about him down in the salt mines, for example, and he was a very good person to the workers down in the salt mines just outside of Krakow. But I want to know more about Casimir.
Kazimierz was extremely distrustful of the church and the nobility, and worried about their effect on the kingdom's stability. So he spent much of his reign implementing sweeping reforms to the Polish legal system, such as a separation of church and state, and the requirement that new laws have explicit written justifications rather than being arbitrary and capricious. Driven by this quest for rational lawmaking, Kazimierz believed that the laws protecting Jews were unenforceable so long as the Polish people were still taught to hate them.
Okay, class, this here is a Jew, and he's the natural enemy of good Catholics like us. Every time you see one, make sure to—
Hey, lady? Could you get out of my house?
Jesus Christ, it can talk.
In 1334, Kazimierz expanded the Statute of Kalisz by imposing massive fines for shouting insults at synagogues and making it illegal to accuse Jews of making human sacrifices. He also believed that Jews would never be tolerated so long as their work was restricted to the inherently shady businesses of money lending, shipping, and law.
You can see where the stereotypes come from, right? When you think of Jews, and this has kind of come from TV shows and things like that, where Jews are good with money. They run businesses and they deal with money. And how true that actually is, I really don't know. I really don't know how accurate. Some stereotypes are spot on. Some are just shocking. So feel free to let me know how accurate that stereotype is. But it just, Casimir is a bloody good bloke, wasn't he? He was a bloody good bloke. And what I loved when he just said about keeping basically church and state separate. That should always be the case. Over in the United States, that clearly is not the case, but it should be. Church should have no jurisdiction over how a state is run.
So he allowed Jews to have whatever job they wanted. Hey, my name's Aaron HaParash. I'm a descendant of the elite hereditary cavalry of ancient Judea, Caring for horses is a cherished family tradition, passed down from father to son for over 1,000 years as our last remaining link to the soil of our ancestors. Can I join your army?
I mean, I guess.
Wow. Neato.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that you signed up, because the last 3 dudes who enlisted this week have all died. I mean, the unit you're asking to join has a casualty rate of like 97%.
Wait, what? Casimir probably hoped that instituting these protections would entice more Jews to move into the country, but that didn't happen. Even in 1334, Poland was still pretty far off the beaten path, and Jews living elsewhere didn't have much reason to leave their existing homes. At least not for a few years until a little thing called the Black Death. Originating in Central Asia, history's deadliest outbreak of bubonic plague arrived in Europe in 1347, when Mongol soldiers catapulted the bodies of plague victims into the Genoese colony of Kaffa in the Crimea. Carried by fleas who lived on the skin of rats, the Genoese brought the disease back to Italy, from which it spread throughout Europe, North Africa, and West Asia. Over the next 3 years, the Black Death killed between 1/3 and half of Europe's population. But part of the reason it was so deadly was because of the cramped, unsanitary conditions most European Christians were living in. Muslim and Jewish communities, with their religious laws regarding personal and household cleanliness, usually fared better. Rabbis even used their positions as community leaders to institute new housekeeping rules to reduce the risk of infection. The Jewish death toll was still catastrophic by any modern standard, but not as catastrophic as for the Christians. And that just wouldn't do.
Those dirty Christians.
By the end of
It's a joke.
1348,
It's a joke.
Jews had been massacred in Toulon and Barcelona, accused of causing the plague by poisoning wells. But it was in the Holy Roman Empire where murder flourished. On Valentine's Day 1349, all 2,000 of Strasbourg's Jews were burned alive. The plague had not yet reached Strasbourg, but it was believed that killing the Jews would prevent it from arriving. By the same reasoning, the entire Jewish population of Erfurt was wiped out, followed in the spring by Frankfurt, Mainz, Cologne, and Speyer. Upon the outbreak of plague, Pope Clement VI had issued 2 papal bulls condemning the blame or killing of Jews as being the work of the devil. It cannot be true that the Jews, by such a heinous crime, are the cause or occasion of the plague, because through many parts of the world, the same plague, by the hidden judgment of God, has afflicted and afflicts the Jews themselves, and many other races who have never lived alongside them.
Well done, Pope Clement. Clearly some see sense. It just, honestly, this video is really highlighting the crap that Jews have been through. Like, I don't understand how Jews can be hated so much. They haven't really done anything. Like, I don't believe in what they believe in, and they don't believe in what others believe in, and Christians don't believe what they believe. Like, literally, no one believes what others believe in. But I wouldn't go around thinking they are the cause for this worldwide, would you call it a epidemic, whatever it is. It seems a little bit irrational, right?
In this effort, he received medical testimony from his personal physician and offered the Jews his personal protection at his court, which had moved from Rome to Avignon.
Man.
But his political rival, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, actively promoted more violence against Jews by declaring that any property belonging to Jews killed in riots would be legally, officially free for the taking. Overall, 510 Jewish communities were erased from the Holy Roman Empire in 1249. Between the death toll from the massacres, those killed by the plague itself, and the flight of German Jews for greener pastures, especially Spain, the Jewish population of Northern Europe fell from over 20,000 to approximately 350 in less than 2 years.
Wow. That is insane figures. It's interesting, actually, because, look, I know this isn't the same numbers as, for example, the Holocaust, and I know it's a touchy subject, so I will tread sort of lightly. But when you see Jewish people, like on TV and things, they always bring up the Holocaust. And completely spot on, completely right in bringing that up. But I wonder how much the Jewish population know and understand about this time, this 2-year period between 1348 and 1350, because this is not something I have ever heard of, and I haven't actively gone and seeked it, obviously, but I wonder how much the average Jew knows about this, and hopefully people will be watching this will be Jewish, so I'd love to know if you know about this. The fact that it went from 25,000 to 350 in the space of 2 years is disgusting, obviously. But do you know about this? Because this is shocking.
But here's an interesting fact. While the rest of Europe was being ravaged by the Black Death, Poland was also being ravaged by the Black Death. Yeah, you may have heard before that Poland somehow avoided the plague, and there are a ton of YouTube videos speculating about it as if it was fact. But this is actually an outdated bit of selection bias. Back in the 1960s, when there was a lot of new scholarship on the Black Death, there weren't many known primary sources from Poland. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. It was also thought at the time that Bohemia had escaped the plague, but more documents emerged proving otherwise. And in recent years, more sophisticated environmental research has revealed the same about Poland. But even if you were just as likely to die from plague as a Jew in Poland, you were a lot less likely to be murdered over it. And by 1351, the majority of the Holy Roman Empire's Jews had crossed the border. In fact, more Jews fled to Poland during the Black Death than had already been living there, which resulted in a radical cultural shift.
There we have it. There, we could possibly end the video there. I think that is almost near the end. There is still more. So basically, with the Holy Roman Empire going a little bit crazy with killing Jews, they weren't killing Jews as much, other than obviously because of the Black Death, they weren't killing Jews as much in Poland. So therefore, Poland right next door to what was the Roman Empire, and therefore off they go, and then maybe that 350 booms into millions.
Throughout the Middle Ages, it was standard for Jews to speak the local language of their neighbors as their own, but with additional vocabulary from Hebrew and written in the Hebrew alphabet. In the case of the Holy Roman Empire, that language was what we now call Middle High German. But in the course of the mass exodus to Poland, these Jews took Middle High German with them. Within a generation, it had displaced Cananic, or Judeo-Slavic, as the main language of the Jewish community there. And while the German spoken in Germany continued to evolve into what we know today, this German didn't. This was the birth of Yiddish. By the time of Kazimier's death in 1370, Poland was still home to less than 1% of the world's Jewish population at that time. But those who had settled there had relative freedom and a new language that was at once uniquely Jewish and yet also intrinsically European. As the continent began its march into the modern era, the size and influence of this community would only grow. It had to. The light of Spain was flickering out.
No, that is it. Fascinating. And a lot of that I had no idea about. But at the end, that statement of it was a safe place and they were able to thrive. I suppose it's like you give a flower lots of water and sunlight and it will grow. And that's clearly what happened. In Poland, Jews were given the freedom and the rights of everyone else, and therefore it was a safe place to be, unlike, for example, in the Roman Empire, where you were being killed and murdered because you were to blame for things that weren't actually your fault. That's absolutely fascinating, and a lot of it is because of King Casimir, his laws that he put in place to give Jews equal rights. So, old King Casimir the Great was a great man and an innovator and brave. Yeah, brave to say, no, these are exactly the same people. They deserve the same rights. It's almost the same thing as what you get with homosexuality now, and people are like, no, they're the same people. Fascinating. I hope you've learned something as well, because I didn't know any of that, and I love learning on this channel, and I love it when other people learn on this channel, and it is brilliant because we learn together. But there we go. Basically, Casimir's gift how the Jews came to Poland, 1966 to 1370. Brilliant, brilliant video. Thank you so much for watching again. I've been Rob, just an Englishman learning about Poland. Make sure you like and subscribe to check out more. I've recently been to Wrocław, and on our YouTube vlog channel, go to Charlie and Rob in the description down below and check out my vlogs from Wrocław. We got vlogs from Kraków, and Charlie has been in Gdansk last year for the Christmas market, where we've also got vlogs. So plenty of content for you to watch if you're new here. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.